You're watching Rogers TV.
You're watching an interesting local show on Rogers TV and you want to know more. That's when you head to rogerstv.com. Our website provides more information about our programs, our hosts, our schedule, and about how you too can get involved with Rogers TV. Visit us online at rogerstv.com.
You're Beetlejuice. Ew.
Is your mom Lydia Dietz?
Unfortunately, I only believe in things that I can see.
Really?
If you ever need to process any of your emotions, I'm here for you.
Emotions processed. Thanks.
You're watching Rogers TV. The following program was provided by a valued member of our local community. Rogers TV is proud to support local producers and share local voices, ideas, and opinions. For more information, please visit our website. The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers Cable or Rogers TV.
Good afternoon, morning, evening, whenever you're listening to this Nbpoli world. My name's Brent Harris. I am here on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, the Wolastoqiyik, and the Passamaquoddy. Sorry, I'm stumbling with my words here. I am joined by the ever so charming Shawn Rose.
Oh, stop.
I swear, I get comments who are like, we love Shawn's voice. I swear, it's that deep baritone you bring to this pod that's really driving up our audience.
It's very kind. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks for joining us, Shawn. We are in the last 5 days of this election. We have the British Columbia election is Saturday. We have the Saskatchewan election happening next week as well. Wait, when is their date? Yeah, it's the same week as ours, but it's later in the week, I think. Anyway, we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
So there's lots of action. We have the American debate is just the week after that, or the American election is just the week after that, which is crazy. On November 5th. Like, it is high time for elections.
Yeah. So just Saskatchewan's next Monday. So
same day as ours.
So this coming Monday, the 21st is ours, and then the 28th is the Saskatchewan election.
Okay, and then there's the American one on November 5th.
Right.
Every week, you guys going to get some cool new election result. This is that's cool. I mean, that basically like lines up our podcast schedule for the next little bit. We'll be able to get Joanna back on the pod after the writ's done, maybe as an MLA. Who can say?
Maybe.
And yeah, so we've got some great stuff to be talking about. Obviously, folks will know that I just dropped a pod with Amanda Monday, who is from New Majority. That just aired. Actually, right now we're recording after I just put it out there. So we're in the last stretch, blitz, trying to get as much conversation on democracy and politics in New Brunswick. And we just had the last debate. And so that's where we're going to start. Shawn, why don't you give us sort of your sort of a hot take, the review, what you noticed, what stood out?
Sure. So last night, as Brent said, on CTV, there was a debate in which Blaine Higgs did show up this time. So, wow, that was... people have been looking for him, saying, where's Blaine? Blaine has been out of sight and has not done many public appearances for the past week. So was he preparing for this debate? Is he just being hidden in the basement so he doesn't annoy more people before the votes get cast? We're not sure, but he did show up for the debate last night. So it was Susan Holt, David Kuhn, and Blaine Higgs on stage at St. Thomas University in Fredericton. It was a recorded debate. It was both televised on CTV 1 and 2 and then also streamed from their website as well. So it was 90 minutes long, had 6 segments, and this is in the shadow of 24% of the electorate having cast votes in the advanced polls. So that's over 110,000 people in the province have already voted, which is actually down from the 2020 pandemic election, which I find interesting in that In that election, there was 130,000 people who cast votes in the advance polls. So why is it down is my question.
Yep.
It's not that interest is down. It's
No.
certainly, I think interest is up, if anything. So are Tories staying home is my question. Are Tories not going to the polls and deciding they're going to sit this one out? Maybe they can't bring themselves to vote for the Greens or the Liberals, but they're washing their hair and no time to go.
Yeah, I mean that. I would say you're right though. If any party was going to have a suppressed voter turnout this election, it's PCs. There's no way around it. You can't get any more motivated than the Liberals or Greens in opposition, needing that breakthrough, needing spending all this time trying to mobilize their base and being able to hold up an incredibly unpopular premier to not just their base but new folks. What did you think as far as the format?
I really like this format. And out of all the debates we've seen on Rogers, and there's the Brunswick Rogers global debate, there was the CBC debate. This one had the most interaction between the candidates and gave the most opportunity, and it actually encouraged some of this crossfire chatter that we've seen avoided explicitly in these other debates. So a little more chance for arguing. There was a lot, I would say, of people talking all at the same time and couldn't really make out anything, but it wasn't a lot. It wasn't, I still remember this debate from 2018 where literally 4 or 5 candidates were all talking at the same time.
Yeah.
It was just gobbledygook. It was indecipherable from a viewer standpoint what points each were trying to make. So we didn't see that. It was fairly well controlled by Todd Battis, I thought, and there were some good jabs I noticed going between the candidates.
I really liked it as well. I have to say, I think though it's probably only possible in a situation where you have no more than 3 people, right? As soon as you have 5 people, 5-6 people on stage, it's going to break down. Hard to have that debate without really stern rules, right? Without very clear boundaries about what's onside and offside, how to engage with each other, if there's penalties, right? Those would be more interesting to me, right? To see some of those tools applied, and doing it live, I think, is something we need to do. You need to see that. I think it's a little bit when it's rote like that. I don't know. Maybe it's my reality TV part of me coming out, but I don't like reality TV. But yeah, I don't know what it is. I just think that would add that layer of authenticity and put you on the spot a little bit. But
I think so.
Yeah, I liked the format. As far as notable moments, I guess my position was that Blaine needed to come out and make the case for why change is unbearable. Right? We're in a change cycle. That's coming against him. His party's kind of fallen into chaos. That's playing against him. He's lost a lot of incumbents. That's playing against him. He's unpopular. That's playing. He's got a lot against him. And the only way to kind of muddle through was to get out and make the case that the change the others are proposing is unbearable. Now, on that front, we'll just talk about Higgs for a second. Do you think and maybe you have a different perspective of what needed to happen, but how did you think he did on that front?
Well, I think he wanted to reframe the debate a little bit. And I think the main theme of what he was trying to get across is, the Liberals are promising you lots of good things that we've already delivered on or we're in the process of delivering on. So There was a few announcements. He called them nothing new health plan, nothing
Yes,
new
he kept saying that.
affordability plan, which is a good line. I mean,
Sure.
I'll give him credit for that. Whoever thought of that it made the point in a very succinct way. Exactly. Yeah, I don't think Blaine came up with that, but he, it was a good line, and he used it to frame all of the Liberal commitments as, anything that they had even thought of or talked about or written on the back of a napkin in a restaurant. He said that was something they were already doing, and it was already in motion, or it was already done, and the Liberals are not announcing anything new by talking about it. That being said, of course, the obvious criticism is it's been 6 years, and if it's something your government has been working on, why aren't we seeing any progress? Is it really something that is a priority for you if it hasn't really been delivered in 6 years? And, we do see, I mean, it's obvious you can look at the government and see where their priorities are. You don't have to listen to them talk. You just have to watch their actions.
Just go see what they've done. Yeah.
Right. And you can tell what their priorities are. It's obvious. So, and I think the other two parties called him out on on that particular item very effectively. Just scanning through my notes here on anything. Higgs talked about the Liberal platform and tried to poke some holes in it.
Yeah, saying something about like 62 promises that are uncosted, and expecting the electorate to believe they won't cost anything.
Yeah, and I've seen that number too. Every time I see one of these criticisms of the Liberal platform, they're just wildly over-exaggerated. I think they really go overboard to such an extent. I saw one ad that said it was $6 billion underestimated.
I did too, yeah, I saw that.
Where are you getting that? I mean, it's not even credible when you exaggerate to that extent. When I heard the 62 uncosted promises, I looked at the ones they identified as their top 5 or 6, and it's like it's all just a modification of an existing program. And they noted that in their platform. If there was money already being spent or earmarked for a certain thing in the budget already, they're not going to cost it or give a net new cost to it, or just a slight increase in cost. And the one that Higgs really noted, and David Kuhn called him out for rage farming, was around the negotiations with First Nations on land claims. So Susan Holt had said, we have to get out of the courtroom, we have to negotiate with people, we can't always be in court suing. And, Higgs's famous line is, if you don't like it, sue me, and is in court on multiple fronts with First Nations, with labor unions, with with students and advocacy groups. So
like Coalition for Human Rights, or what's that one? The Human Rights Coalition. I'm trying to remember that.
Yeah, exactly. CCLA over policy, and ECAL over policy 713 changes. So there's a private law firm that Higgs has farmed all this litigation out to that's literally making millions, literally millions every year off of the Higgs government's strategy here. So Susan,
don't worry, those lawyers are out campaigning for him right now, I'm sure.
Oh, I bet. And I noted Riley to an advocate here in New Brunswick around. There was lawyers who were making millions off of these 713 lawsuits who threw $250 towards the Pride campaign in St. John, the Pride Parade that happened in the past summer. And it's like, you guys could have, with all the money you're making off of arguing against rights of
could open a collaborative care
LGBTQ people, you could throw a little more than $250 their way. But anyways, that being said,
I agree that I did find Higgs really failed to make the case for Susan and or the Greens being unbearable. He hinted at we've seen Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau. We'll see the same from David Kuhn and Susan Holt piece. But it didn't get anywhere, and he didn't land it really significantly. He just sort of mentioned it in passing by. But, he was quite amenable with David Kuhn on a couple of things, as was Susan Holt. And, it was interesting where both Susan and Blaine were agreeing with different things, different points with David, and David with whatever that position was. And so I wondered as I watched it, are they trying to present Blaine as more of an amenable, more of a collaborative, more of a soft but firm-handed leader? Like, there was some change in his posture and his tone, but he certainly got flustered again. He certainly didn't have a lot of clapbacks that were well-timed or well-landed. And so I think it's too little too late for them to try to recast him now in that light. They would have been much better off, I think, casting him in the determined to, stop this, as much as it's reductionist, and I hate that type of politics, but like, it would have been much better for them to try to keep and maintain this kind of line that has been developed around, we can't let the Liberals take us back into the red. The Greens are just like Jagmeet Singh. If you don't vote for the PCs, we're going to lose all our progress on all these fronts and go into bigger debt. Like, they didn't land any of that. And so I was a little bit confused as to, why Blaine had softened his approach. Maybe that's more of his own personal disposition come out. I have heard people say that Blaine is actually very indecisive, and not just nobodies. These are MLAs that used to work for him who have had sort of private conversations with me saying, despite what you read and see, Blaine's actually very indecisive. And that indecisiveness gets him in trouble, gets him to a place where all of a sudden a decision gets made, and it's because there was no willingness to be decisive when it really needed to be made, and now had to be made, and it got made wrong, and it pissed everybody off, and then he got mad that everybody got mad at him and doubled down on his position. Like, that's sort of how some people have...
Sounds about right.
Yeah, it seems chaotic sometimes. Yeah, and like, he's not this bold leader. This is how we're doing it. If you don't like it, there's the door. Here's my articulated vision. This is the direction exactly we're going and why. Like, that's not there. So yeah, I would say Blaine did not succeed on making the case for change unbearable.
No, certainly not. And I'm just looking through some of the discussions from last night. So on healthcare, I think we've heard the green position is this generational investment, multi-billion-dollar generational investment. They're calling it in healthcare, to transform it into, give it some well-needed supports, get it target funding in certain places like health records and collaborative clinics, and make sure it's well-funded enough to really make a big impact. And he's fairly transparent about it. To his credit, we think this will put us into deficit, actually, to do what we need to do here. Whereas both Higgs and Holt are pledging balanced budgets as part of their platforms.
Yeah. So before we get into the platforms, because that's a good segue there, let's get to Susan in the debate performance. I know we don't want to spend the whole time on debates, but let's just sum it up real quick. Do we think... my perspective of Susan was that she had one of the lines of the night for sure. When she broke down the sort of analysis of the last 6 years and how healthcare workers and nurses had been responding to Higgs because of his approach, and, referencing those recommendations that were completely ignored and none of which were applied, that probably was the line of the night, the most clear. Nobody interrupted. She was able to land the punch. I would say I don't know if you would agree.
Absolutely. I mean, that point was very effectively made, and it was something that's indisputable. It's not like she's making an argument. The CEOs of the health corporations testified to the legislature that they jointly brought 9 nurse retention strategies forward to Higgs, and he vetoed 8 out of 9. The ninth one was travel nurses. And basically, this is, I'm not going to do this. I'm not paying extra. I'm not, going to lavish funds on these government workers. And basically, I'm just going to contract it out, and they can work side by side with people making 3 times as much as them and we'll see how they like it, basically. Just kind of, and if you think about it from a boss perspective, it's like, I'm not giving in to you people. I'll bring in contractors, and
that's what he did. That's what Blaine did when he worked with Irving Oil. When the workers at the refinery striked, what did they do? They brought in scab workers from Ontario. I know a guy, an engineer from Ontario, got paid $160,000 for 4 months of work. It's like, anyway, I could go off on that. So
I mean, and this is Blaine's. Blaine runs it like a business. So what do the nurses do? They, some of them end up leaving the profession altogether. Some of them take jobs as travel nurses. Some travel to Amherst to make 3 times the money. So it's not it's no wonder that healthcare is in trouble when you hear about some of these retention strategies that have been tried, and that's just who Higgs is. This is the way he manages. He thinks of the government, any government employee, be it a nurse, a doctor, or a snowplow driver, as he's an employee. He has to be managed as an employee. The government doesn't have money to throw away, just as sort of some private business would be the analogy, I think. Doesn't have money to waste. You have to not waste a cent on anybody. It doesn't matter what their talent is. They're replaceable. And I think that's just really how he thinks about managing people in general, and how he's managed his people throughout his entire life as a manager. So when you think about it that way, I mean, you can see how doctors and nurses are feeling unappreciated, and teachers, when they get treated just like they're not putting in the extra effort, or they're not going over and above, or they're the ones who are holding the whole system together with both hands. And
I heard a doctor say
a lot more than they're getting compensated for.
Yeah, I heard a doctor say it best, actually. I was at a medical society forum with a bunch of candidates, and I heard them say, we can't just rely on New Brunswick being a great place to live and the fact that they have kids in the school system to be, the main thrust of what keeps our healthcare system and professionals here. So I think that point was well landed by Susan. And I think the other part she did well, she didn't attack David Kuhn. She was agreeable with David. And the reason I think it would have been a trap for her to do that is because, one, nobody likes to see somebody punching down, right? There is this, like, somebody has to be the underdog, and somebody has to be, the dog to be taken down. And Susan has done a good job at not missing the opportunity to present herself as the underdog that's going to overcome these odds to win. And that plays into some of that human psychology around narrative and, the arc of sort of story and all that. Not that I'm going to be too philosophical here, but I think it would have been a mistake. I think she did a good job actually demonstrating there has been this challenge to Susan kind of presented by some, that she's not very collaborative, despite the fact that she wants to say she is. The debate proved she could be. I think there was some times where she was agreeable, and she even laughed at something David said. So I think she landed a significant punch. It was clean, and I would say, overall, probably improved her positioning with people. Like, the takeaway from Susan, I think, was better than the CBC debate.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, people in general like David, and even if you don't agree with the green strategy or the way that some of their ideas are, unconventional and radical by comparison. And some people are put off by that. No one dislikes David at all. David's a great guy, a smart guy, great big heart, and really well liked. So it doesn't gain Susan. I think Susan knows she's far enough ahead of David that she doesn't need to take him down a peg. She needs to take Blaine down a peg.
Yeah,
and
she needs to just continue to keep those PC voters at home.
Right, and I think to your point around jabs, I think Susan did have a couple. One thing I wanted to mention about Blaine's jabs is every time he's tried to punch back at Susan, he was kind of talking down to her. Like, I wouldn't expect you to understand that. You wouldn't know because you don't think that way. It was
a little bit personal.
Yeah, it was really personal and insulting, really. And this is how they talk to each other in the legislature, actually. It's in question period. They're very, those kind of jabs are normal. I think you need a different approach in an actual political debate for an election, and he didn't do that.
Question period is not the right approach, and people hate question period. Question period is built for media, right? Not for people.
Well, and I mean, he has to be a little conscious of how that looks too. If you're say a female voter and there's the male premier telling you don't know what you're talking about, that's going to have evoke an obvious emotion in female voters who have been mansplained a million times in their life by somebody who thinks they don't know what they're talking about. So I think Susan just let him walk right into it and kept inviting those opportunities. She didn't lose anything by it, and she probably gained the support she was looking for.
Yeah, and finally we'll wrap it up with David. We'll spend a few minutes here on David. I was back and forth on whether to give the line of the night to Susan or David. The problem with David's line, I thought it was really good, and I thought it was, one of the most combative moments of the night was when Blaine was going on about, we're not going to let free drugs on the street. We're done with that. We're not going to do that anymore. No more free heroin, no more free drugs, blah, 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 blah. And he kept making this pitch, crime is up because drug use is up, and we're the only party going to do something about that. And Blaine and David just kept interrupting. What about methadone? What about methadone? Do you believe in methadone? Do you believe in methadone? And then Higgs got all flustered and was just like, well, no, I don't, or well, yes, it's not that. And then David finally said when Higgs finally looked to him and said, well, that's free drug use and it works, right? Like, and it's true. That's like, again, this idea that we're going to reduce the opioid crisis into the fact that there is this mythical place where you can get free heroin, right, is insane. And it only works on people who don't know any better, and who don't care to find out about the facts, right? And that is going to be a lot of people. A lot of people are going to resonate. Well, I did see somebody sleeping on the street, and I'm sick and tired of it, and they got to get off the drugs. Like, we can't do anything about that type of person who thinks that way and doesn't want to understand more of it. But I did think that was a great moment where it's like the clear combat happened right then. There was some back and forth. Susan did try to interrupt Blaine a couple times. Blaine did do it back and forth. But that was a moment where Kuhn just like would not stop at interrupting Blaine until Blaine acknowledged something, and he got that. But it was interrupted. It wasn't a clean hit. It was hard to hear. So I had to give the night, but that was a good moment as well. And there was a couple of times when they were talking about the rent cap that David just started laughing about this idea being that they had a rent cap and they were doing rent spike protection and all this stuff. And he had the audacity to look at Susan and said, well, no one's got over a 10% rent hike in this province. We capped it, so that's not possible. It's like, buddy, where are you at?
There's no rent cap. Yeah, and then David pretended to put on a cap. He said, are you talking about this kind of cap? Or?
Yeah. And anyway, so I thought David did good. I mean, I think he keeps his party alive with this type of performance. I think he keeps people who are undecided voters engaged. I think he presents
Very much
himself
so.
as an amenable option, as a measured option. He did make a case against both Blaine and Susan, but he didn't lean in on that. He didn't, like, I know last time you were talking about sort of that frustration around, well, these parties have always been at it, and that's why things suck. That kind of argument. He made the point that we've had this red and blue seesaw, and it doesn't have to be that way. And then he moved on to talking about a few issues. So I don't know, what was your thoughts about David's performance?
Just on that last point, that's and that is a bugaboo of mine, of course, and I mentioned that at one of our recent podcasts. And we were watching last night, and when David said that, unprompted, Amanda, my wife, who's sitting beside me, who doesn't listen to this podcast, and very much an unpolitical person, said, "Oh, you're just saying that because you've never been in power." And it's like, I that's exactly it. So just someone who doesn't consider themselves political or who doesn't follow things as closely, having the same spontaneous reaction as my opinion, I found that very gratifying. And just to come back to your point around this methadone, so Blaine was on a podcast for True North Media, which is a right-leaning pseudo-journalistic YouTube channel.
Bunch of dummies.
Where he was interviewed at length about Policy 713, and the second half of it was around his so-called compassionate, what do they call it? Compassionate incarceration. Compassionate care, I forget what the buzzword he gave. It's basically arresting people who are addicted and forcing them into recovery, and that you would need the notwithstanding clause to do it because
arresting people in a kind way. That's basically how he was trying to frame it.
Of course, for their own good, right?
Yeah.
And so on that podcast, Blaine had said outright he is not in favor of therapies or treatments that involve people staying addicted. So that's exactly what he was talking about, methadone, right? Because that's, you substitute the methadone for the legal drug, and people learn how to manage it without getting high, the physical dependency. They learn how to live with it better, and then they can slowly wean themselves off it once they can get a handle on it. The whole idea behind methadone. But people like Blaine see that as, staying addicted to drugs and prolonging the solution, and being something very simple. You just need to go cold turkey, and that's the way you really do it. So I was glad to see David call him out on that, because that's, methadone is a treatment used for addiction all over the world that when a premier casts doubt on it, like Blaine did, in a very public way, I find that very damaging. And
it sets us all back, right? Because now someone on methadone. Now you've got the premier saying they're just another drug user getting free drugs from the system, and the government paying for that. Now you're mad at your neighbor who's trying to overcome a pretty desperate addiction and utilizing a tool that's widely, accepted by folks to be an important and incredibly important piece of the recovery track for many people. And it's just bad for social fabric. I agree. CTV is going to have the largest debate audience. I would say out of the debate audience, though, majority of people viewing this debate are probably still decided voters.
Probably. Some of the chatter I saw online is people didn't know it was happening. They only watched the first half hour. They didn't know what channel it was on, and then all the the people who listen to this podcast, I think every one of them caught it. So I think the people who are the most interested are the ones who watched and are probably the most focused at picking apart what everyone had said. Cheering for their person, cheering against the opposition, whoever that is for that person. I think that's fair.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good overview of our performances, where we at, what was on the line, what was at the stake. I don't think we're going to see any major change after the debate, but I do think there'll be some changes. I do think that this debate probably lowered our undecided voters by 5 points. I'm going to go out on a limb, and that's just my guess because I think this does have a larger audience. You can still track this debate down. It was a format that allowed for the true colors to be seen by the candidates. So yeah, I think it will help to kind of solidify folks, and kudos to people who haven't voted. I know people are like, advanced polls are good. I don't know how good advanced polls are, and I'll pause it to you this, Shawn, and get your thought. And we don't want to spend too much time here because I want to talk about polls for a second. But don't you think it's a little bit immature to vote before the parties have had the full amount of time to make their case to a voter? I guess it's like we can't do anything but the fact that a lot of people are already going to be decided going into it, and a lot of people don't want to change their mind about anything. Okay, fine. But to me, it's like, shouldn't we just have election day have more, instead of trying to get people to vote early, shouldn't we be trying to accommodate people to vote at all and on those last few days of the election? Because, right up until this debate, I think there's been a lot left on the line. We only saw the platforms drop fully last week. It's just hard to imagine being somebody who's nonpartisan, undecided, being able to make up their mind before this week.
Yeah, I understand the point. I think it has merit for sure. And so again, just playing devil's advocate. So if we say the writ dropped on the 19th, and it's the first advance poll was the 11th of October, so
3 weeks.
Yeah, 3 weeks. That might 3 out of a 32-day campaign. Some people might argue, hey, that's enough.
Yeah.
The second advance poll was on the 15th, so almost a month later. Is that enough to? Yeah, are they going to hear more? Are they going to hear something that's
new?
Yeah, for the 25% or 24% of people who voted, are they going to hear something say, oh, God, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, right.
I regret my vote now. I wish I could take that back. Maybe yes, probably no. I don't know.
Fair enough.
I think they try to drive out. I think people do say, I don't have time to vote, and I don't have time to stand in line, and I don't have, I'm just too busy. And if they do some advanced polls, and I know Julia Woodhull-Melnick, for example, said she was going to be away on election day, but when she found out the advanced poll day, it coordinated beautifully with her travel schedule, and she was able to go vote early. So I'm okay with it personally. I think I can see the merit in it, but you're right. There could be something that comes out that could change somebody's vote later. And if they do vote before the entire campaign's unfolded, they might regret it. Or they might cast a vote that they'd like to take back.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, I thought it was just worth talking about. But right now, I want to talk about polls. And I'm sorry, Shawn, not that I want to log you off here at all, but I might take a few minutes to sort of set the stage here, because we still have to talk about the platforms, and I want to make sure we have at least 10 minutes, 15 minutes to do that. So I'm just going to take 3 to 5 minutes here to set the stage, and then you give me your take, right? We'll have a little kind of an authentic discussion about where the polls are. But I kind of precursored this off with you, Shawn, at the start. I said, look, this just really sticks in my craw, as they say down south, some of this polling that's going around. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get into it. I'm going to kind of position this in a way that I think is helpful. So just give me 1 second. Okay, just wanted to make sure my screen was set. So bear with me, Shawn. This is what drove me nuts. I'm going to try to be concise. This drove me nuts, seeing this poll, this new poll that came out from Narrative Research and Brunswick News kind of teamed up, and it's not just Greater St. John. They're showing, this is a whole article. Sorry, Brunswick News, I have a subscription to you, but I won't stop on any of the things other than what Adam Huris is putting out on Twitter. So Adam, I'm not going to take your story and post it online, just taking the pictures that you've already shared there, sir. So just so we're clear, we've got Fredericton with this kind of breakdown. And then we come down here. We got Moncton with this kind of breakdown. And you know what? We can talk about that a little bit for those listening. Greater Moncton, 32 Liberals, 20 PCs, 9 Green, 3 PCs, 3% don't want to vote. 5 said they're not going to say, and 28 said, I don't know yet. When we go up to Greater Fredericton, that was Moncton. So we got Greater Fredericton, 27 Liberals, 22 PCs, 14 Greens, 1-1 for the People's Alliance and NDP. 3% aren't voting, 6% not telling, and 26% don't know yet. And then St. John, 27, 26 for the Liberals ahead by 1 point there. Green 7, NDP 2, 4 don't know, 7 not saying, 27 don't, undecided. Can we trust these polls? And I'm going to position it to you this way, folks. No, we cannot. And not because what Mark McKelvin calls me online, out of all the lefties online, you seem to have the biggest sense about this as to why it's not just inconvenient for your party, or your opinion on this. But here's the thing. Here is a picture of the NDP breakthrough in, if those of you who remember, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So you got the blue, orange, and red. Those are the majority parties, NDP. As you can see, there is this cross section. That is the start of the writ drop. Okay, everything the month and a half, 2 months before the writ, the NDP are floating way down around 15 points, right? Which is their historic turnout. That's historically their average, right? They can swell to get up there to 24, 25, and they can drop down to 15, 12. That's their floor. It took, if you look at where the campaign starts with them with 3 polls. 3 polls are done. You see the little dot, you see the big orange dot, and you see the little dots correspond with different polls. They are outliers the further away they are, and also depends on sample sizes. My point about this graph is to look at how many polls had to occur between election day starting and the election day itself. The final tally over here, as you can see, gives the NDP this historic breakthrough, the Jack Layton orange crush, they called it. But there were 13 polls done to capture the true intentions of people, largely for the NDP in Quebec. But nonetheless, that's how many polls it took to get it close. And as you can see, even into the last week, the Conservatives overperformed. The NDP were pretty much right where people were saying, maybe a little under. The Liberals were under a little bit. But it was close. And you still have outliers on this that were showing the Conservatives with getting this big majority. You can see one of these big outliers here, or the NDP the week before the election actually being much closer to the Liberals. My point is this. This poll by Adam Huris wrote about, interviewed 345 people, for example, in St. John, 325. When we have to calculate the margin of error, we got to look at the population size and sample size. We've got to find our square root sample size and get that standard deviation. We have to multiply by the Z-score, which is your desired confidence level. Confidence level just means how confident do you want to be in this poll? Is it good enough to be 80% confident? It just depends on what you're trying to do. You can never be 100% confident. It's not statistically possible. You can get up to 99. But of course, the more confident you want to be, the more work you have to do to get there. And these polls are just not it, right? And this is mostly done by Narrative and Brunswick News. Who is Narrative? Well, Narrative consistently gets down here, guys, a C+ on pollster ratings. This is what Eric Grenier calls a data desert. There just is not anything coming out of New Brunswick, right? If you look at the current projection of New Brunswick, here it is, 42 Liberals, 39 Conservatives, 15 for the Greens, with, the Greens getting anywhere between 0 and 4 seats, likely to. That's what Canada 338 is saying. Eric Grenier says a little bit different. This is Philip Fournier, obviously. But when we want to talk about what polls have informed this, it's 2. It's Main Street and Narrative. And last election, for example, this screen shows you 2020 election, we had polls by Leger, Oracle Research, Narrative, Ecos, Main Street, and Moo. MOO or MQO, sorry, Moo. Moo, I read that funny. MQO. So before you guys want to jump and say, yeah, we got to be scared of the vote split. This polling right now I can't say does, but may have a marginal rate or margin of error, sorry, of up to 10 points. A lot of the polling that's been done it doesn't tell you what the age demographic is. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here now, but that's just it. I had to say something. Don't want to go on at length about it. Sorry to steal the thunder for too long here. I wish we had Ecos and wish we had another Main Street poll. Unfortunately, Main Street's initial poll was not very good. It wasn't regionally relevant, nor it did give us demographical breakdowns, but it didn't give us a proper read of the region. They really were trying to suss out that Francophone Southern New Brunswick split, less so the three cities. Narrative Research tried to do the three cities, but just typing in the sample size, using a confidence rate of 95%, and looking at the population of St. John, that gives us statistical margin of error of around 5%, 4.68%, I think it was when I ran the numbers. So when you layer that on with the fact we don't know the majority of people in this Narrative Research poll, how old they are, they don't say. If it's landline heavy, we know they're going to skew older. And a lot of young people just don't respond to surveys. So that could add another 3 to 4 points. This could have statistical error of 10 points, which makes it almost irrelevant, almost worse than irrelevant, because it causes fear in some people about vote splitting, which drives me crazy, right? I'm going to shut up now. That's my soapbox on polling. No, I'm not a pollster. No, I'm not a mathematician. I know how these work, and we wouldn't qualify what's happening in New Brunswick right now at the federal level as relevant, as statistically relevant. All the major polling firms are busy in Saskatchewan and BC, bigger markets, more money. That's where they're going to play. So,
yeah, I think you're making a fairly compelling case that there's just not enough relevant polling happening here to pull out a conclusive result, and we can see that in some of these polls that we've seen recently, like when we were going through the Main Street poll last week, as you just said, there was a lot of reason to doubt some of the results that we saw. For example, that poll had a blue sweep of Fredericton. I don't think anyone sees that happening, honestly.
No.
And if we look at this, just take this narrative poll by example, it's not predicting anything close to that. It's has a healthy turnout for the Greens and a fairly close race between the Liberals, and with them being ahead of the PCs. So they don't really add up. And I mean, I think they're entertaining. I mean, it's like doing a web poll on Twitter. You might get, it's actually, these polls are slightly better than that, of course, because there is some structure and analysis and statistical basis behind it. But I mean, if you're just putting your finger in the air and people are trying to figure out, are things exactly, where are things going right now? It is something. Are they conclusive? Do they tell the whole story? Are there anything that we could place money on or take to the bank? No. And
I'm placing I placed one drink on it. I told Mark McKelman on Twitter that if they were close, or if they were under 5% off, 5 points off, then I would buy him a drink. So that's what's on the line for me.
Yeah,
anyway.
I find it curious that there's still a quarter of the people undecided this late in the campaign. So I'm just looking quickly for the dates on this one as to when they were polled, because that seems like a high undecided this late in the campaign.
It's a lot. Yeah, 25%, 27% in St. John. I think 26 and Fred. Anyway, a bunch of you're talking thousands and thousands of votes that are just I don't know. And to me, I don't know how uncommon that is, but I would say with the population shift we've seen in New Brunswick, newcomers
good point.
moving here, people from other parts of Canada.
That could be it.
I think they're going to be like, I'm going to pay attention to this one because I don't know what going on here in New Brunswick. Excuse me.
Right. So between the 7th and the 11th is when it was taken. So last week, last Saturday to last Wednesday, pretty much. So
platforms. Let's move on to that.
Platforms, yes. So we do finally, over the weekend, long weekend that just happened, Thanksgiving weekend, on Saturday of the long weekend, in the middle of the afternoon, with no fanfare, the PCs put out their platform. And it was 60 pages long, and it had so much detail in it. No, just kidding. It was 2 pages long. One of those pages was a letter from Blaine Higgs beside a list of what they say their accomplishments were. And if you haven't saw those in government New Brunswick ads already, you probably haven't been on social media, because they've been talking about their accomplishments, or what they say their accomplishments are, on the taxpayers' dime, through government of New Brunswick advertisements for literally months now. So many of you have probably seen those accomplishments before. And from a new commitment standpoint, there's the HST tax cut. They're saying they're going to keep going with improving access to health care. No new drug injection sites. That must be red meat for the base, because no one I know is talking about the drug injection sites. And maybe I'm not in the right community, or
You're not, for sure. I see people believe it, but it's up there with 15-minute city crack conspiracy theories, because there's only one in New Brunswick, and it's not even really a full harm reduction type site, or safe injection site, to the extent we see in BC. So it's a straw man to compare us to BC and say, oh, well, BC tried this and it failed. It's like, okay, plenty of other countries did it and it succeeded.
Right.
So I don't know what we're talking about here. The alternative to locking people up just means we're going to have to raise taxes and build 4 more jails. We already don't have judicial. That's the thing, is like, this platform is built for people who don't care to ask questions.
Right. Fair.
That would be and not to be too anti-conservative, but even as far as conservative premiers go and conservative parties in Canada, this is really bad. Tim Houston knocked it out of the park with their Progressive Conservative Party in Nova Scotia when they ran and formed majority government under Tim Houston. I mean, I thought the platform was still light, but it had far more detail than this. Same party.
Oh, yeah. If you compare this to Blaine Higgs's 2018 or 2020 platform, this is a pale shadow of what they would have put out before. Financial literacy in schools, many people have made the point that those courses have existed. They were brought in some cases under the Alwork government or beforehand from the Francophone system's perspective back 20 years ago.
Yes.
So, again, I think that's a plank that appeals to his base. Respecting parents, again, that is all around. Who doesn't respect parents? We all respect parents.
Plenty of parents I don't respect.
Well,
but yes, I agree.
That's a dog whistle.
Absolutely.
Respecting parents who think that trans kids shouldn't be able to change their name unless they have their mother and father's permission.
Yeah.
So he's dog whistling that as well. And the next one, defending land ownership, again, a dog whistle against natives because of the First Nation lawsuit that's ongoing. Axe the carbon tax, that is a Justin Trudeau.
Hey, he said that in 2018. That's not changed. At least he's consistently asking for the same thing.
Balance the budget, that's okay. That's a promise, I guess. But that's something that we all agree that we want, or most people agree that they want. Invest in addiction treatment. Again, I don't see a lot of
arresting, basically. We're going to admit people whether they want it or not. I don't think anybody's going to vote for the PCs based on their platform. And I
Yeah,
don't think an undecided voter who's trying to educate themselves and trying to come to grips with these two, with who to vote for in this election, is going to walk away from that impressed. So
not at all.
no.
No,
What
it's
about
not a convincing case.
what about the liberal platform?
Now, I did read this when it came out. It's fairly detailed, I find, and a lot of it was built collaboratively, not only with New Brunswickers who had
Mm,
Susan went on her what people have called a listening tour, just her cross province. She's consulted widely with many groups and very
mhm,
publicly and transparently in a way I haven't seen anyone do in an election campaign that I can remember.
mm,
To the level that she's done it. So I think that's to her credit. I think she's learned a lot. She's the type of person that when she gets in a room with somebody, she absorbs a lot of what they're trying to tell her and then processes it and turns it around into policy. I think
mm.
she's actually pretty good at that, and not from her own biases, as some claim, and I would agree with that Blaine Higgs does. He views everything through his personal lens, but I think Susan is quite transparently mirroring what people are telling her their concerns are. And
Mm.
the other part that built this was actually collaboration with the Liberal membership, people who would have come to the meetings, the policy convention, and debated and voted on different clauses and several different policy areas, and that's what she came forward with. So there has been some chatter about policy 713,
Mm.
and in the platform they commit to looking into it. In the past, she had previously committed to uphold the child and youth advocates recommendations on policy
Kelly
713,
Lamrocks, yeah, yeah.
which included lowering the age to 12. And then it looked like she was sort of backing off a little bit and being a little cagey. And Bill Hogan was saying you should really tell people what your commitment is here, and trying to needle her a little bit. And she did come out and subsequently clarify to the press that her position is still uphold the child and youth
Child Youth Advocate.
advocates recommendations, which is, I think, a very reasonable position and middle of the road too. It's not as open as the old policy was,
Mm.
but it's still at I think, and a point. And if you really look at the report that Kelly generated, the reason for the age 12 is talked about extensively. It's like, when does a child have capacity? When should they be able to start having these conversations? When do different stages of legal theory apply? And it's all, it's literally 97 pages long of analysis, and then detailed recommendations that the government just had to copy paste into legislation to adopt these recommendations and put them into effect. So
Yeah.
it's, I think, a very reasonable position for her to take. And there will be criticism. It doesn't go far enough, and there is criticism that it goes too far. So
And
maybe
I
it
don't think,
strikes the right balance. I don't
yeah,
know.
I think you and I have talked about this a couple of times. This policy 713 discussion, it's a bit of a distraction from the real issues that most people care about and are concerned about. No one was complaining about policy 713 before, and nobody is really, I don't think, holding up this as their primary objective in this election, is to settle the debate around this. So lots of people will be on one side or another. But so when I guess the biggest thing, the biggest weakness that the Liberals consistently have, if their brand has a weakness, it's that they're going to raise their tax and spend. They're going to tax more and they're going to spend more for sure, but that's what's going to cost you more in taxes. We aren't seeing any tax raises in this budget. We are seeing commitment to a balanced budget. Where do you see in the platform it's kind of squaring that circle of improving resources but still balancing the budget? What do you think Where do you think those extra resources are going to come from?
Okay, so I do have one complaint, major complaint with this platform, is that it does appear, and this was something that was picked up by the press right away, it does appear to double count revenue at first glance. And I couldn't figure out, I was really frustrated why such a seemingly well thought out, well resourced platform could make such a simple math mistake. How could you double count revenue? And I had been looking for an explanation for this for days now, and I didn't get it until this morning. I was listening to the CBC, and Robert Jones had a story on this that actually explained this to me for the first time in a sufficient way, or a way that I was satisfied with. So what the Liberals did was look at Blaine Higgs and the PC's platform and said their budget doesn't balance unless there's this $400 million bogey out there that they're not talking about. So we're going to assume that $400 million bogey exists and they know about it, and it's with the finance department now. And we're just going to plan for that money the same way they did. When you think about it, I mean, it's a little cynical, right? I mean, yeah, it's you're planning on revenue that you said your opponent exists. Is it, is it the kind of thing I would take to an accountant? No.
Right.
But does it put the Liberal platform in the same footing as the PC platform? Probably. I think credibly, yes. That was the summary Jacques Bertrand gave as well when he said it. And now I understand what he was getting at is the Liberal response to his criticism about double counting was if the PCs make sense, so does ours, because we both have the same assumption.
Yeah,
okay.
Just the assumption, but I mean, it's like fair enough, I guess, right? We don't see costing to everything in there. I think that's, the reason I think it's how you're going to pay for it is being one of the, I think, key interest points for somebody who, if somebody's going to pick up a platform, number one, they're a mutant. Like they're one in 100.
Yeah.
If somebody picks up a platform,
fair.
If we get to a place where 5 out of 10 people are reading the platform, we have done terrific in democracy. Right? We've really hit a home run. But out of that 1% that read it, there are probably a number of them that are undecided, nonpartisan, smart folks who are just like, I don't give a about these guys. What are they saying? What are they going to do? The Greens have a ton of stuff in their platform, right? How long was the Liberal platform? Sorry, I just didn't have it in front of me.
30 pages.
30 pages, okay. Lots of stuff, lots of issues in there that they cover. We don't have time to go in at all. The Greens is 44 pages if you don't count the letter and some of the preamble stuff. But it's laid out probably the best I've ever seen them lay one out. It's just a lot. If anybody is into policy, my God, go look at the Green policy book. It is so long. It is so hard to read. They've at least attempted to capture what their membership have called on them to do and put it into a digestible format, which I think is great. But there is a lot in there. Like you said, they have admitted that we're going to go into deficits. There's no question. If we're going to do what we need to do, not just on healthcare, but on some of these other issues, we're going to go into deficits. I do think I was surprised to hear Richard Salion, the economist, give some credence to the Greens. He praised them for, which is not normal. We don't normally see an economist praising the third party or any party for that matter. Richard's usually he's one of the top. You got Herb Emery, you got Richard, and you got David out there that are doing they're doing economics in New Brunswick and getting sort of brought into those conversations. David Campbell, sorry. And so I was surprised to see that. It was around their Social Security piece. raising Social Security to a livable place. It's kind of tied to this living income, this guaranteed basic income that they're proposing. The Greens have not done a good job at making the case for that other places have around, how it simplifies our welfare state significantly. A lot of people involved with policing the welfare system. This basically replaces people with a sort of rote formula around your income level tied to your tax return. So, filing those taxes becomes incredibly important. But I do say, and this is something I'm surprised David didn't hone in on in the debate. I know that Steve Boots did a breakdown of the platform, so people can go check out Steve Boots. He did one, and his big critique is, the Greens here have a big platform and no conversation on how they're going to pay for it. I just looked to this section around taxation and financing in local government, and you look at this part here. I don't know why, because polling suggests it would play very well around this idea of end access to government funding for companies that use offshore tax havens to avoid paying income taxes in New Brunswick. That was a major contentious issue with the Irvings, still is. Eliminate property tax exemptions for heavy industries. That's a big issue for St. John. I know that well because I'm on council. That leaves millions of dollars on the tax table every year comparatively. And overhaul the property tax assessment system so they're fair and equitable. That doesn't necessarily create money, but it creates a little transparency. But I haven't seen anybody put in place, and I'm surprised the Greens didn't attempt to communicate here what they expect these measures to do to increase government revenue, because they undoubtedly will. When you look at just look at Bob Jones and the 95,000 articles he's written on how NB Power or Irving Oil or JDI or McCain's or somebody has this weird subsidy that seemingly is attached to them, or property that's majorly underassessed, right? So yeah, I'm a little bit surprised by that, but it's kind of the only measure I can see in any of the platforms that speaks to something that would create revenue rather than just take revenue, spend revenue, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I mean, I'm reading this as you're talking, and I think the first part on page 20 could just be summarized by saying tax serving. Tax serving and get the money from them. And I think, again, this is where it's really easy to say tax all the corporations and take the money from them, because that's really a really simple, straightforward argument to make to a voter, that we're going to take the money from the companies who make lots of profits and not from you. But so again, I'm going to have to play the devil's advocate here as the unpopular standpoint. Let's pretend you're McCain's, and you see the New Brunswick government coming after you for, let's just pick a number, $25 million per year of taxes that people think you should be paying. And I don't know if that's the exemptions. I'm just making up numbers here. So, but we know, for example, the subsidy on electricity to JDI is a substantial amount. So
at least we're $3.5 million after the last tax rate.
So what if that was canceled? What do you think JDI, these major employers, these major contributors to the economy of the area, these people with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of our citizens on their payrolls, are going to do when the government comes after them for, any amount of significant cash?
Lobby them.
They're not going to lose money. They're going to take it out on those workers. They're corporations. They're founded with capitalist principles to make money. They're J.D. Irving, McCain's, Irving Oil.
If they want to be competitive, I'll push back on the devil's advocacy here a little bit and say this.
They're not going to take $1 million hits to their bottom line.
No, but
And
they have to be competitive. And right now, the number one competitive thing in this country is labor, right? So, despite what people will say that it's the end of the laborers market, it's not. We have the historic unemployment rate is what we have right now, and it's actually even lower than the national average in New Brunswick. By taking it out on their workers, they risk losing their competitive advantage around labor. So, I'd say the analysis there needs to be a lot deeper than what we're saying. But then again,
sure.
I would say my main goal in life is to see Irving pay what it would in Nova Scotia or Maine. So
But
I am certainly
what makes you
biased.
think they're paying any more in Nova Scotia? The big business people who provide a lot of jobs get a lot of breaks from government.
They
And
do. It's just we've run the numbers, from our own industrial sites here in St. John so many times. It's not even funny. And just said, where would they go to get a better deal? There isn't anywhere. And who would they compete with in another place if we changed it? It's like, of course, they're always going to say they can't do it. But I guess the reason I point that out is not to try to get into a long drawn out debate about it, but it's to say there is a lot of political capital on the table that is sick and tired of seeing these announcements and property tax breaks and subsidies to companies. There's a lot of voters who are fed up with that. So to not take the time to put a figure out there to say, because you playing devil's advocate, that's a mature person who can comprehend, hey, there might be a cost to this move, and I don't disagree. There very well could be. We don't know what it is, how they would do it, but there is a card to play there to say, look, we expect that to raise $150 million in government revenue, and we're going to put that over here on these care clinics we talked to you about. And they didn't do that. And that surprised me. I think there was a net here to score on, and they didn't choose to score on it.
it's a great, I mean, overall, I think most people would read this green platform and agree with the majority of it. There's some of it, again, that's, again, we get into the whole stop spraying debate.
Yeah, good point.
Glyphosate is legal. And so I know a lot of people don't like it, but it's legal. So until it becomes illegal for companies to use it, if companies think it's going to be useful, and it's legal based on analysis from Health Canada, it's not rules that people made up themselves. I mean, I know industry plays a role in setting the standards and doing the testing and so on.
Sure does.
But it's legal, and it's legal for a reason. And until it's made illegal, companies are going to keep using it. So again, just another example of how you can say, stop spraying in a green platform, and why the Liberals, who are definitely have a chance, I guess, of forming the government and having to live up to what they put in their platform, are just a little more cagey about it, saying, well, we'll look at all this, but if it's legal, it's legal.
I don't think it's their priority either, right? Like the Liberals are saying clearly here, it's not whenever you see caginess or anything like that, I know the Liberal candidates were not allowed to sign the pledge to stop spraying glyphosate in New Brunswick. I know there's a nuanced debate here. Quebec doesn't allow for spraying of glyphosate from airplanes and helicopters over clear-cutted forest. They only allow for select use. There's different regulations in different provinces. Yes, it is a legal entity, like you say, comes with a warning label that's a mile long on it, of course. But it's and I don't disagree. I guess for me, it's like do platforms win elections? No. Do they win undecided voters? Yes. How do they stack up? I think we can say that this is a competition between the Liberal and the Green platform for those people who care about it, which, hey, it's probably 1,000 people in the province, statistically speaking. So it's not nothing.
It's the question I see online from just people who I don't know, but who, might approach me because I think I might know is, when are the platforms being, I was probably asked that literally 25 times in the past few weeks as to when the platforms are going to be released and what's in it. And so I think you're right, there is a segment of the voting population who's looking for that information and wants to make up their minds based on it.
Yeah, yeah. My friend, we are over time, and this is our last pod. I think. I don't know if I'll be able to. If something happens that's dramatic, we might call the team back together here. But I really appreciate your time on all this, Shawn, and breaking this down and covering all these different blind spots that I have. It's been a lot of fun over the past
It
4
has.
weeks.
I've had a blast, and thanks for having me. And we'll welcome back Joanne next week
Yes.
after the election.
Yeah, come what may, but we're certainly not going to let you go anywhere. So we'll be in touch, and hopefully everybody has gotten a lot of this pod. I haven't got a lot of feedback from you guys, but I see that you're listening to the podcast. So if you're driving and you're working and you're listening to podcasts, just do me a favor, make a little note about something that you thought about in this pod and send us an Instagram message, a Facebook message, a Twitter message, an email, nbpolipod@gmail.com. You can find any of our stuff on socials. Send us what you thought, because there's a few people who are kind of commenting on things. Our listenership is up. We're well over 210 every pod now, every week. So within the first 7 days, there's almost 200 people, and then it kind of rounds off at around 240 by 14 days. And then online too, on Rogers TV, I see we're getting about 100 views on YouTube anyway. I don't know about the cable network. So listen, the audience is there. You guys are here and doing stuff, and you think stuff, but you got to let us know, because we aren't the smartest people. Despite what we want you to believe, we're not the smartest people in the room. Just love hearing from you guys. So, but anyway, thanks again, Shawn.
Sir,
you have a good rest of the day.
you too.
Due to the length of the preceding program, we now join the regularly scheduled program already in progress.
And becomes the first person to fly a glider.
The 1800s are marked with many significant moments. With the Sikorsky rocket equation, the first photograph of the moon, and observations of other galaxies, the addition of steam power on gliders, Sikorsky proposing a space elevator, Otto Lichtenfeld was experimenting with 2,500 gliders. Canada's first scientific institution created by Edward Sabin, and electromagnetic observatory at the University of Toronto. All these events led to the Wright brothers. In 1903, invent, build, and fly, the world's first successful motor-operated airplane.
The first successful power flight in Canada was the Silver Dart, flown by the Canadian Aerial Experiment Association out of Quebec, Nova Scotia.
Exploring the history of space science was a lot of fun. Now let's consider today and the future of space innovation by talking with an expert about space and Canada's role in it.
Hi Isabel, welcome to Maker Fun.
Thanks for calling, Grace.
I recently learned that the Canadian Space Agency was created more than 30 years ago to help Canadian innovation and exploration. My papa showed me a picture of the Canadarm. He said it was a robotic arm that was used to support astronauts during their spacewalks. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. It helped astronauts during their spacewalks and did so many other things, like maintaining the space station, capturing cargo vehicles, fixing satellites like the Hubble Space Telescope.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Oh, I really loved art and everything that was science and math. But I must say that if there would have been a subject about the future, that would have been my favorite subject. I was fascinated by the future, but also technologies of the future. And I thought that they looked like magic. They were so advanced. And I was reading science fiction a lot. And art allowed me to imagine the future and draw what I imagine would be the future. And studying math and science allowed me to understand a little bit of how the technology works. I really like to understand how things worked and to solve problems.